Now, ladies and gentlemen, you've heard earlier this morning from the government about its plans to help boost exports, boost the economy, and help us as a business community to do more and to be the best we can be. We also have a chance now to hear from the opposition as well, which is setting out its own plans, including some which I believe we'll be hearing about now, today, to help boost business. So it falls to me now to introduce our next speaker, who is the Right Honourable Ed Miliband MP. He is the MP for Doncaster North, but most of you will know him, of course, as the leader of the Labour Party and the leader of Her Majesty's loyal opposition. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ed Miliband.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, Adam, thank you so much for that incredibly kind reception, and it is great to be here at the British Chambers of Commerce annual conference. I want to start by paying tribute to the BCC and the fantastic work that it does for its 100,000 members across the country. And I think the unique thing about the BCC is that you're rooted in every community in the country. You know what is happening to business at the sharp end. And as John Longworth has shown in the last few days, he's willing to speak truth to power, whatever the issue. And I want to pay particular tribute to John Longworth and the fantastic work that he does as a voice for British business. And you know, I get to meet lots of interesting people in this job, and one of the people I met recently was the soon-to-be outgoing Governor of the Bank of England, Mervyn King. And I'm sure we'd all like to wish him well when he leaves office. But I have to sort of tell you a little bit about my meeting with Mervyn King, because I was there at the Bank of England meeting him for 3/4 of an hour or so, and something slightly alarming happened towards the end of the meeting, because suddenly a lady dressed in pink, because they wear pink at the Bank of England, not the Governor of the Bank of England, but the messengers, rushed in with a message, and the Governor looked at the message and carried on impassively, as you'd expect of a Governor of the Bank of England. And then about 5 minutes later, the same lady rushed in again with a second message. And by this point, I was getting alarmed, frankly. So I said to him, look, Governor, you've got many important people to see and important things to do. You know, please don't let me detain you. And he said, no, he said, it's rather embarrassing, really. And I said, is it the cricket scores? Is that what you've been informed about? He said, no. He said, the first message said, do ask Ed Miliband, is it a good idea to go and stay at the Four Seasons Hotel in Palo Alto, California? I said, right. I said, well, what did the second message say? And he said, well, that's the embarrassing part. It said, please apologize to Ed Miliband. It was David Miliband who stayed at the Four Seasons Hotel in Palo Alto, California. That is an absolutely true story. Look, I'm here to talk about Labour's approach to business and Labour's approach to helping the small and medium-sized businesses that I think are the backbone of our economy. And you know, John Longworth said something the other day which really struck me. He said, firms across Britain can drive growth, but they can't do it alone. And I think that's an incredibly important idea, because you create the wealth, you make the profits, you employ the people, but you need a country that supports you. And I think that is so important. I call it a recovery made by the many. The hundreds of thousands and millions of small and medium-sized businesses in this country who are the backbone of the British economy. And I think John is right about that. Now, we've got the budget in 6 days' time. I think it is very, very important, as the BCC has said, that the budget helps your businesses, helps us to grow again as an economy, and helps to reduce the deficit on a sustainable basis. Now, for us as the Labour Party, I think that recovery made by the many starts with the confidence and security of your customers. We've called for a temporary cut in VAT in the budget and the restoration of a 10p tax rate, so that consumers can have money in their pockets to start buying the goods and services that you produce and sell. I also believe that the Chancellor needs to look in the budget at the issue of business rates, particularly as they affect small businesses, many of whom in this room will be finding that business rates are imposing huge costs on them and their business and making it an incredible struggle to survive. But I want today to talk to you not just about the immediate measures that the budget should be taking, because I actually think what the budget should be doing is much more than that. It should be facing up to the big long-term challenges that our country faces, the big long-term challenges that our country can't shrink from, and it should be addressing them head-on. And the way I would put it is that the old ways won't do anymore, and we need to build new institutions out of the rubble of the old. And what do I mean by that? I mean a different banking system for the future, a new skills system, a patriotic championing of the British firm, a new approach to infrastructure, which I know from John Longworth is very important to the BCC, all underpinned by something that I think is very important, which is confidence and clarity about Britain's place in the world, particularly important to exporters. And that's what I want to talk to you about today, because that's the way I think we'll get a recovery that lasts, a recovery genuinely made by the many. But let me start with the banking system, because I think it's a commonplace now that to rebuild our economy, we need a different banking system for the future. And I want to talk to you about the Labour Party's ideas on that. I start from a very, very simple proposition, which is that banks are there to serve Britain's businesses. Britain's businesses aren't there to serve Britain's banks. And I think that should be the starting point for any discussion about the reform of the banking system that we need. And when I go around the country and talk to businesses, and I'm sure many people in this room have the same experience, you tell me the same thing, which is that you can't get the finance that you need from banks in this country, either because the banks don't seem to understand your business or don't seem to care about your business. And you know, despite the government's funding for lending scheme, we saw a £4.5 billion fall in net lending to small businesses in the last quarter of last year. And for too often, it seems, for the big banks in Britain, it's still business as usual. Now, we've proposed changes to the funding for lending scheme, and I think they're important changes, and I hope the government adopts them. But there's something more I want to say to you, which is I think tinkering around the edges of the way the banking system works is not going to be the answer. We need a wholly new banking system for the future, and I want to say what I mean by that. And it starts from understanding the causes of what went wrong before the financial crisis, because this is a decades-long problem. In the 10 years up to the financial crisis, 84% of the lending from Britain's banks went to property and financial services. 84%, not to the rest of the economy. That's a far larger proportion than in any of our competitor countries. We've got to change that for the future. And in a way, there's a parable of all that, which is Northern Rock. Northern Rock, founded as a great mutual to serve the northeast of England, a proud record of 100 years of success that ended in ignominious collapse in gambling in the city and on the property market, not serving the real economy. And my case to you today is we've got to learn the lessons of this. We've got to learn the deep lessons of this. And what does that mean in practice? First of all, obviously, it means proper regulation of the banking system. A proper separation between casino and retail banking. And we've said that we should implement the full spirit and principles of John Vickers' proposals and have a full back power to split up the banks by law, the so-called Glass-Steagall approach, split up the banks by law if that doesn't work. So that's the first thing. Secondly, we need more competition on the high street. We need new challenger banks because you don't have enough choice of the banks that are available to you. And I hear this so often from businesses who say to me, well, actually, I don't feel I've got a choice, and I feel that the bank that I'm currently with just has me in their grip. I think it's also about the idea of a British investment bank, which we're working on with the British Chambers of Commerce. And I think this is a very, very important idea about how you provide long-term patient capital to small businesses, small and medium-sized businesses in this country. But there's something else that I want to talk about today, and that's the idea of regional banking. Regional banking serving each and every region of the country and only serving that region alone. If you like, the founding principles of Northern Rock, not what it became. I think this is such an important idea for the future, and I see it very much as part of the British Investment Bank. I think we need not banks that like to say no to you, but banks that know your business. Not banks that you mistrust, but banks that you can come to trust. And I think regional banking is a very important part of that approach. Now, our Small Business Task Force has been published today. And that is proposing the idea of bringing the German idea of the Sparkassen, local banks serving the local economy, to Britain. I just commit to this today. The next Labour government will introduce regional banks to serve the regional economy. I think that's the first step we need in the One Nation Labour Party that I lead, serving small businesses and serving entrepreneurs and building that recovery made by the many. But just as you need a banking system, a finance system that properly serves your needs, so you need a skills system that provides you with the workforce that you need. And you know, again, I start from a very simple idea, which is that every young person in Britain should have a pathway to good qualifications, to a job, and indeed a career. And that's not happening at the moment. But here's the thing. That's not happening at the moment, but at the same time, businesses across Britain are saying, we can't get the young people with the training and skills that we need. You've got vacancies often which you can't fill with local workers because you just don't think that they've got the skills that you need. And look, we've got to change that if we're going to succeed as a country. Again, it's a decades-long problem. And what I propose to you is that we need a transformation in the opportunities, the education, and the culture regarding the 50% of young people who don't go to university. And let me say what I mean by that. If you take a 14-year-old today and they're academic, then they know what route is open to them. It's GCSEs and A-levels and then going on to university. And it's harder than it was, but they know the route. But then if we're all honest with each other, think about the young person who wants to take a different route, who wants to do crafts or skills or get an apprenticeship. I think Britain offers them much, much less. It's very unclear what is available to them and what they should do. And that's not just bad for them, that's bad for the country as a whole. And together, I think we've got to change that. Again, it's a decades-long problem. I think it starts with the alphabet soup of vocational qualifications that we have. I mean, it probably confuses you as businesses, it certainly confuses me, and it'll definitely confuse young people. So what's my answer to that? We need a clear qualification in each area that a young person should aim at. That's why we've proposed a new technical baccalaureate, a gold standard in each area for young people, so they know what they're aiming for. That's not about inventing new qualifications, but it's about accrediting that gold standard that we need. It's secondly, and I think very importantly, not just about getting a clear set of qualifications, but also qualifications that are relevant to your business. Because too often people say, well, actually the people have been trained in a particular qualification, but that doesn't really serve the needs of my business. That's why we say, let's put employers in charge, for the first time properly in charge, of money for training and apprenticeships, which is a long-held demand of employers, and I think would actually make a big, big difference. And then finally, we've got to have a change in culture in this country. I think this is so, so important. Young people, whether they go to university or not, need to know that the country respects their aspirations. It's about work experience in schools. I'm shocked by the number of businesses who say to me, I can't get into my local school to talk to them about the opportunities that business offers them. I think we need elite technical colleges that young people can aspire to go to, like Oxford and Cambridge. And I also think we've got to do something else. We've got to change the culture in this country that says university is best and vocational education is second best. Because frankly, other countries don't have that culture, and we shouldn't have that culture either, in my view. So we've got to change our skills system too, as part of the long-term changes that our country needs. Thirdly, we've got to change the culture around business. I think we've got a problem in this country. We're ashamed to say that we're patriotic about British businesses. Other countries aren't ashamed to say they're patriotic about British businesses, and we shouldn't be either. And we know the long-standing problems that so many businesses face in this country. The long-standing problems of growing from being a small business to a successful medium-sized business, and a successful medium-sized business into a world-beating corporation. Now, I think there is a good reason for that, and the problems that many businesses are facing. I think it's to do with this culture of short-termism that holds business back in the way that decisions are made. It's so difficult to plan for the long term because all of the pressures from finance and elsewhere are on the short term. And we recently got George Cox, who's the former head of the Institute of Directors, to do a report for us on this. And I think it's a very, very important report, and I hope you'll look at it if you haven't already. Because he says, look, there's things we can change to make a difference to this. Let's get rid of quarterly reporting rules for listed companies, because that makes it much more likely that companies will think about next month's profits, not planning for 5 or 10 years ahead. Let's change the takeover rules in this country so that businesses don't find themselves in the position where speculators and hedge funds can swoop in for a quick profit in order to take them over, in order for them to be taken over, to the detriment of the firm and the detriment of our economy as a whole. And let's change the rules also on executive remuneration, so it's much more long-term and incentivizes executives to take the long view. But there's also things we can do to help small businesses as well. And as I said to you, our Small Business Task Force has produced a report today, again, which I hope you'll engage with, on some of our recommendations. One which I think is incredibly exciting, and there may be people here who are already taking advantage of these ideas, is new hubs of enterprise. Places where small businesses can share the costs that they face, can share the costs of back office services, financial advice, and a whole range of other things. I think that is an incredibly exciting idea, and an idea which will help small businesses to invent, invest, train, and prosper, all of the things that are so vital for you to contribute to our economic success. But the culture of short-termism doesn't just afflict small business, it afflicts government as well. It's better to be open about that. And perhaps the worst area where it afflicts government is around infrastructure. And as I said at the outset, that's been a long-standing issue that the BCC has rightly raised. I think the issues are twofold. One, around the resourcing of our infrastructure, and secondly, around the planning of our infrastructure. Now, if there was a Labour budget next month, next week, we would be advancing our investment in our infrastructure, because we think it's right at a time when the construction sector is flat on its back to make that investment in infrastructure now. But there's something else as well. We've got to get this issue of how we plan for our infrastructure much better than we do. We know we need a world-beating infrastructure in transport and energy and IT and communications if we're to succeed as a country, and we know too often we don't have it at the moment. The interesting thing for me is that actually we can do this well. If you take the Olympic Games, that was actually a shining example of us planning and successfully doing a set of infrastructure projects on time and indeed under budget. Perhaps inspired by that, we've asked John Armitt, the former head of the Olympic Delivery Authority, to do a review for us on how we get the infrastructure decisions right in this country. And that's everything from how we resource our infrastructure to how we make planning decisions, and also, and this is a tough one, how we build greater consensus across the political spectrum on the big infrastructure decisions that our country faces. Personally, I think this is essential if we're going to get infrastructure right for now and indeed for the long term. So these are 4 big, what I would call institutional changes around banking, around skills, around the British company, around infrastructure, that the next Labour government, if it's elected, will put into place, essential, I believe, for our economy. But I think that needs to be underpinned by clarity about our place in the world. And the BCC has been making the very, very strong case, and I think rightly so, for greater support for exporters. And I know we have many people in the room who are exploiting new markets, and rightly so, and indeed doing even better than they were in their existing markets. And John has made the case for greater support through export hubs for you to do that, and that's something that we absolutely support. But I think you also need clarity about where Britain's place is going to be in the world. And that takes me to the question of the European Union. I totally understand the frustrations that many BCC members have about the European Union, and indeed about business regulations from the EU. And I am also frustrated by an EU that seems to be producing austerity and unemployment, not jobs and growth. But I say this to you very clearly, just so you know where the Labour Party stands. I believe our future lies squarely within the European Union, not outside the European Union. Because I think it would be crazy for us as a country to turn our back on a market of 500 million people And I also believe that those people who pose a choice between us engaging in the EU and reaching out to the BRIC countries, Brazil, China, Mexico, and others, are wrong. We've got much more chance of reaching out to those countries, actually, if we're within the EU rather than outside it. Because actually, those trade deals and the decisions to lower trade barriers will be taken without us if we're outside the European Union. So, I believe we need a massive change in a financial and banking system, a revolution in skills, a patriotic championing of the British company, a new approach to infrastructure, all underpinned by clarity and confidence about our place in the world. But I think there's one other thing we need to do if we're going to prosper in the long term, and that's where I want to finish. You know, my dad was a refugee who came to this country at the age of 16. He came as a Jewish refugee from the Nazis in 1940. And he joined the Royal Navy. And he didn't talk much about the war, but he did talk a lot about his time in the Navy. And he said it was an extraordinary experience because there were people of all backgrounds, all walks of life, all classes who came together for a common purpose, a shared vision of the country. And that's what I'm about. That's what One Nation is about. It's what John Longworth said when he said, we can't do it alone. And you know, there's lots of pessimism around about Britain today. I'm a massive optimist about Britain and what we can achieve. Just look at the Olympic Games. We came together, we joined together, and it was a transformative experience for our country. I think that should show us what we can achieve as a nation, not just for ourselves, but for the country as a whole. I believe that is what we have shown throughout our history. I believe that is what we've shown particularly at our darkest times. I think that's what you show every day as small and medium-sized businesses at the sharp end of difficult economic times. And I think it's what we can show again as a country. And I look forward to working with you to make that happen. Thank you very much. Now, I think I'm going to take questions. I think I stand between you and lunch, so don't let that put you off. There's a gentleman in the second row, and perhaps you can say your name and where you're from.
My name is Nick Bunting, and I'm from a charity called Prime. You've spoken very eloquently about the need to help young people and support them into the world of work. Given that there are now more people over 50 receiving unemployment-related benefits than young people, could you tell us what the Labour Party's view is on the support for the older unemployed who's just going to get more and more?
What was your name, I'm sorry?
Nick Bunting.
Nick, okay, I'm going to take three if I may, but I promise you I'll answer them all.
Lady at the back.
Gentleman in the middle.
Thanks, Ed. Paul Kalinauckas from BCRS Business Loans. Access to finance has come up several times today. You're talking about a banking approach to solving this, but what about this whole sector of non-bank lending that's developed? You know, you don't have to be a bank to lend money to small businesses. What's the Labour Party's policy?
Peer-to-peer lending and other things like that.
Community development finance institutions, which was Labour Party instigated several years ago and such like.
Really good question. There's a lady, what was the lady who had a question? Yeah, there's a lady at the back over there.
Hello, Kate Rose Wonga. I actually have exactly the same question, so perhaps you can give the floor to someone else.
Okay.
Yes, me too, thank you.
What was your name, I'm sorry?
Kate.
Kate, thanks. Where are you from, Kate?
From Wonga.
Great. Okay, and there's a gentleman in the middle.
Hi there, my name's Zen Jaworski from the Supply Chain Academy. How would the Labour Party handle the delicate balance between EU regulations and the interests of employment in the UK when it comes to awarding major contracts?
When you say when it comes to awarding major contracts, just say a little bit more about what you mean.
Well, where we've seen a number of contracts awarded over the past years, adherence to EU regulations seems to have taken precedence over the protection of British jobs.
Okay. Well, I'll come through another round if I'm allowed by Adam in a minute. Let me try and answer those. So, Nick, on your question, I think it's a really fair and important question. We've proposed, just like for young people, we've proposed a jobs guarantee. We've also proposed that for everybody over the age of 25 after 2 years. And now I appreciate that's after 2 years, and there should be help actually for the over 50s in particular as soon as they get out of work, because all of the evidence is that the longer people are out of work, the much harder it is, particularly at an older age, to get back into it. So I think it's a very, very fair point. And look, the other thing I sort of say on this is I feel like if government was more coordinated and clear about its intentions in relation to employment, I think you could get lots of businesses in the country behind it. There are some problems, like massive reform of our banking system, that's going to take time, and it's better to be open about that. I think there are other problems, like getting our young people back to work, getting other people back to work, which I think are soluble, actually, and kind of, in a way, more soluble in the short term. I think if government is willing to put resources behind it, and we've shown how we can do that, and mobilizing every business, every charity as well, because civil society plays a massively important role. Paul and Kate, your questions. I think it's a very fair point. And look, community finance institutions, other lenders, peer-to-peer lending. A gentleman came up to me just as I was waiting to come on, talking about his role in terms of peer-to-peer lending. All of that is important, but at the same time, we shouldn't give up on our banks. You've got to develop a set of banking institutions which are actually going to serve the real economy. And I don't think it's that complicated, this issue about financial services, in the following sense. Financial services are incredibly important to Britain in their own right as a business, but they've got a dual role which is also serving the real economy. And so I think all of these other creative ideas, CDFIs, all of the other ideas are really, really important, but let's get our banking system right. And again, other countries can do it. And, there's a reason why we've ended up with an insufficiently diverse industrial base as a country, too concentrated, in my view, too concentrated away from manufacturing and other things. And I think part of the reason is because we haven't got the finance system right, and I think we've got to change it. The question about EU regulations, I think what you're sort of asking about is partly procurement rules and the extent to which procurement rules can help local people and the extent to which it can't, which is an issue in relation to the issues I was talking about championing the British firm and so on. Personally, I think we've taken too orthodox a view on the procurement rules in the past. A very, very narrow treasury value for money view about the procurement rules. And somebody who was once an advisor in the Treasury, I think that there's a lot more that can be done to encourage businesses to provide apprenticeships, to help ensure there's local employment, and other countries tend to do it, and we've tended to use, I think, the EU procurement rules to say we can't do this, we can't do that. I think there are ways in which, within those rules, those things can be done if you have the will to do it. Can I take another round?
Absolutely, one more round.
One more round, I'm allowed. Okay, second row.
My name's Jackie Fairfax. I'm chairman of a small company based in Cambridgeshire. You talk about giving funding to the employers to be able to actually get their own training. How do you envisage that happening?
Tell us about your business, Jackie. What does your business do?
We're an energy consultancy. At the moment, we've got 15 apprentices. There's only 30 of us there, but half of them are apprentices. But we would like to be able to do more special.
I think that deserves a round of applause for helping to train the next generation. That is, Jackie, that is brilliant. And how do you manage to? It'd be interesting for me, and I'm sure people in the room to know. How do you manage to do that?
5 years ago, we didn't have an apprentice. We took on one apprentice, and now we've had 1,000% growth in the business. And we've got 15 apprentices, and I put it all down to the apprenticeship scheme. But I would like to have funding to actually train my apprentices in what I need them to do, which is energy skills, and I can't do that at the moment.
And you find they're trained in the things you don't need them to do?
Yes.
Right.
Well, what I want them to do, but I want them more specialist training, and I'm sure a lot of our employers feel the same.
Okay, that's a really good question. I'll try and give the best answer I can. The gentleman in the fourth row, just over here.
My name is Yemi Adefulu. I'm from Nigeria. Yemi. There are countries with which Britain has traded for many years, hundreds of years, we were told even this morning. And in the recent economy, Britain has looked away. We're told that the emphasis now is to go back to those trading partners in the emerging market and find ways and means of increasing the trade. What take do you have on this? How do you intend to increase trade with those traditional partners in the emerging market?
Those traditional partners, did you say where, sorry?
In the emerging market.
Okay, good question, sir, thank you. And there was a gentleman over, there's quite a lot of people actually. I don't mind going on, but I'm probably going to stop you having lunch. The gentleman over here, sorry, yeah.
Thank you. My name is Simon Landy. I'm chair of the British Chamber of Commerce in Thailand. My question is about Lord Green's initiative, which you're probably familiar with. We're being asked, along with many international chambers, to take over certain tasks, market entry tasks for British business from UKTI. And we're all very supportive of this initiative. Our principal concern is a possible change of policy with the Labour government. So my question is whether Labour supports this policy and whether we can gear up for this now.
Let me ask the sort of basic question about it. Do you think the policy is working? Because that's a good place to start.
It hasn't started yet.
Oh, it hasn't started. When does it start?
Well, within the next month or two.
Right, okay. Let's see, who else? Any ladies who'd like to ask? Yes, there's a lady over here. I'm sorry, I'm trying to get a bit of balance.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Emma Tainton-Young. I'm from Plymouth Chamber of Commerce.
I'm sorry, what?
Emma Tainton-Young from Plymouth Chamber of
Excellent.
Commerce. I'm interested in your view on regional banking. Having worked at a building society for many years, that's what building societies used to do, is lend locally. But you have to have a split between retail and wholesale funding in order to fund both sides of the markets. Going back, all these building societies had to merge in order to stay in the markets, which is why we don't have the regional banks anymore. How would your proposal be different?
Okay, I'll see if I can answer that question. Let me go in reverse order. Emma, on your question, and I don't mind taking another round, but up to Adam. On your question, Emma, let me say a little bit about what our vision is. But again, this is for discussion. So we've said, along with the government, that there should be a British investment bank, which a sort of national institution, which is specifically directed at providing funds to small and medium-sized businesses. And there's a question about how much that is capitalized. My real most important point today is that we've got to make sure that those funds don't just get concentrated on the southeast, or don't just get concentrated on particular sectors, but are actually spread right out across the country. And the obvious way to do that is with a regional network. And so that is the vision. And I think this is a big institutional change. I mean, admittedly, as you point out, it's sort of going back to where we were. I think that is doable with the British Investment Bank as, if you like, the parent organisation of this regional banking network. And so it requires its capitalisation and that to be done. But as I say, we're going to consult on this, we're going to listen to people's thoughts on this. But I think it could, just for example, in your region, I think it could just make a real difference to businesses in that area to know that there is a dedicated regional bank. Apart from anything else, it will mean that the bank will have a duty to get to know the customer, and you won't be sending off an application sort of online to somewhere in Canary Wharf, but actually, it will be a local set of decisions that are made, and I think that is the real attraction of the idea. Sir, Simon, your question, look, the reason I asked, is it going to work, or is it working, is because that should be our test as an opposition. Look, let's be frank about this. When I was a minister, I used to say, when I first got the job as Minister for Charities, I think it was, I used to say, well, I've got good news for you. I've not thought of any initiatives yet. And people would cheer, because the problem about big government ministers is that they come along and say, let's just throw everything up in the air. And so, let's look at whether this thing is working. If it is working, then we'll keep it. and we'll want to work with you. And the reason I made the emphasis I did in my speech about export support is I know this is something that the BCC has been really, really hot on and concerned about, and it is something that we've got to get right, because it's incredibly important. And it takes me to the gentleman's question, which is, how do we ensure that we, not only in emerging markets but everywhere, support our exporters? Well, we've got to have the right structures of support in place. You've got to have a competitive economy here. I also think personally that it is also help to have, as I said in my speech, clarity about Britain's place in the world and where Britain is going. But I think there's huge opportunities for us, not just in places like China and Brazil and elsewhere, but in a whole range of other markets. And we have huge assets as Britain. I just make this other point to you. I think it should also mean that we welcome students to this country, legitimate students to this country, because that is part of building those links with other countries, and that can make a big, big difference when it comes to exporting and finance. Now, where was Jackie? Yeah, and remind me of your question, Jackie, sorry. Apprentices. So what are we going to do about money for apprentices? So here's my view about this. It seems to me that what happens is that too often people are trained, sometimes in FE colleges, many FE colleges do a fantastic job, with skills that businesses don't find relevant. And basically what we are looking at is how do we, and this is what we want to do, change the balance of who controls the money. Is it, and this is where we're looking for what is the right mechanism for business to control the money. Could be chambers of commerce, could be other organizations that start to control the resources that are spent on training and apprenticeships. Because that means that they can help a business like yours provide apprenticeships. So I think it's about changing where that money lies and moving it, simply out of simply being in the FE sector to giving much more of a say to businesses. Now, I personally think that alongside that greater power for businesses, there need to be some responsibilities about what is done with the money. But I think it's a sort of different approach to say, let's not have the state spending the money centrally. Let's devolve that power down to businesses, and let's find the institutions that can do it. And actually, lots of other countries have a similar approach. I think it could make a real difference to businesses like yours.
After that tour de force, I would love to be able to continue to take questions, but I am keeping our audience from their well-deserved lunch. Okay. Can I thank you very, very much indeed, ladies and gentlemen, Ed Miliband, the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.